You just sit in the back and yeah. Big meat. Money.
Yeah.
Okay, there's the email from Karen.
Hopefully. Make all the right decisions, none are wrong. Right, buddy?
That's right. We made it really simple actually
Yeah,
for
I
this one.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
There are certain things where
Okay.
this one.
Make my phone be-
Well, it's,
Give me across the street.
Wow. and big picture is really fun to work.
Okay, I think we have quorum. So I
Here
get,
comes- Here it comes.
there's Sadie, Lyle,
Oh, there's Council Phillips.
and Maria,
Yeah.
and Trevor. There's 5.
Sorry,
And
I had
the-
trouble selecting the link.
Yeah.
Big voices. And then
Yes, here comes Steve.
Steve, and then in the room, we've got Colum and Anna. We got everybody, correct?
We have, yeah, there's Maria. Okay.
Okay.
She's, is she not in there?
Lori, we ready to rock and roll on your end?
You looking for it?
Mayor, Mayor Clark.
Okay.
Did you say Anna's in the room? Anna Hanson's
Anna.
not in the room.
Oh, okay.
Anna's hiding on vacation.
Got it.
Okay, who's there from, oh, so we've got Dan instead of, we have
Yeah,
Dan.
I'm sitting in for Anna today.
All right,
I know Anna. I don't see.
I don't
You didn't look like that.
You look better looking than this side of the thing.
all right.
Lots harder to.
Hi, Steve. Okay. With that, then, I would like to call to order the Salem Kaiser Area Transportation Study for Tuesday, June 28th, 2022. And let's see. Lori, can you do roll call with on screen and in the room for the record?
Okay, in person, I've got Mike Jaffe, Ray Jackson, Karen Odenthal, Kim Sapner, Dan Fricky, Chris French, Colm Willis, Kathy, whoops. Have you, sorry, you're online and Colm's online. Okay, and then I have,
Holmes in the room.
In the room.
oh, Colm's in the room. in
But I got
order.
Danielle's name tag here.
Yeah. Okay, and then online I've got Sadie, Lyle, Mark Bernard, you, Kathy, Steve Horning, Janelle Shanahan, Ryan Crowther, Maria, and Trevor.
Okay. Thank you very much. The first order of business is the approval of the policy committee meetings from May 24th, 2022. Were there any additions or corrections for any us to note? If not, a motion to approve as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second,
Moved by Lyle, seconded by
Trevor.
Trevor. Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And Chair Clark, I'll just
Any
note
opposed,
that
signify by saying no.
Chair Clark, I'll just
Yes.
note that we attached last month's PowerPoint regarding federal funding and other transportation goals to the end of the minutes, so for your information.
That was a fantastic ad. Thank you so much for that. Make sure we had that. And I've actually shared that out with my Traffic Safety Bike Ped Committee, which is our local committee that is advisory for the city council and for myself. So thank you very much for making that available. At this time, I'd like to go to public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the policy committee today? Either hand up if you're online or sing out if you're in the room because I can't see you. You can speak out instead of sing out. I'm just thinking about the musical. Okay, seeing none, we're going to go on to cost escalations. Item D, SKATS tip. This is Karen.
So I actually have 3 agenda items that I'll be presenting you
with you today, agenda item D, E, and F. And they're all really interrelated. I have them separated into isolated areas, but they really all are interrelated. So I'm going to discuss them in three parts. So agenda item D is kind of the financial assumptions and what goes into developing the TIP, and then how cost escalations have affected and impacted the amount of funding that is going to be available. And in agenda item E, I'm going to kind of present a summary of the call for projects, the prioritization process we've gone through, public outreach, kind of to let you see what, where we are and all of that. And then agenda item F is actually a request for additional funds for a project that has experienced the cost escalations that we will be talking about in agenda item D. So it all kind of flows together. I may be asking for input at various points, but please feel free to ask for clarification. And I might tell you that it will be coming later. So.
And is there any way you can minimize your Zoom so it's like that one person?
That's not me, that's that.
Yeah, but if you, they don't see. Oh, it's still like that?
Yeah, that's what, so you have to do it up there.
Can you do it, right?
There we go.
That's much better.
Yeah, it wasn't me.
Okay.
Okay. So we're gonna start with kind of the basics. So since we regularly talk about two TIPs, so we have the adopted TIP and the update, and I'm gonna refer to the TIP as the update. Now I can't see those things. I'm going to talk to the update. And so we're going to talk about some general understanding of how it's developed. So each TIP covers 4 active years. In the current TIP, or the active TIP, it covers the years 21, 22, 23, and 24. But we consider 2 illustrative years, and that would be 25 and 26. Those are the TIP, the years that we use to help program complete projects, and it kind of gives certainty. It helps us stagger our phasing a little better. And then for the TIP update, those years will be the 24, 25, 26, 27 would be the active years, and then 28 and 29, the new illustrative years. And so you can see that 24 is a duplicate year. It's in both TIPs. The illustrative years, 25, 26 now become active years, and then we add 1 new active year in 27, and then 28, 29 again are illustrative years. 27 then will be the duplicate year for the next update. Any questions about that? Okay. So when we develop the TIP, we have to make several assumptions. And then, so based on federal highway and ODOT projections, we this time are assuming that we're going to be receiving about $7.75 million a year. That's with a limitation, that's after limitation. Hopefully there's an explanation in your packet in the memo that's in there that explains limitation if you don't remember what that is. At any rate, that plus we have $2 million of unprogrammed funds from the active TIP. And that gives us $33 million over the course of the 4 years. We're not going to talk illustrative years. We're only going to talk the active years right now. So then we have to look at the what we already have programmed. And so we have our continuing regional programs. And if the policy committee desires, we would continue those programs. Those are the Traffic Control Center, the Transportation Options Programs, and the MPO support. And that's about $1.33 million a year, not necessarily programmed yearly, but that's about what it is. And that adds up to a little over $5.5 million. Then we have the existing TIP projects that are in that 2024 year, the year that was in both TIPs. plus a little inflation, and that's almost $7 million. Then we add those TIP projects that were illustrative years. And we slip them, we add them to the program. And because inflation has been through the roof, we inflated that a little bit more than I had inflated the first time we did it, because we have to put anticipated year of expenditure costs. That's a little over 11 million. That leaves us a little over $9 million to program for, to deal with. And this is why we're a little, it's all convoluted. But when we did the call for projects, we asked the project sponsors of the projects that were going to be in the illustrative years or in the active TIP. If any of those projects are underfunded, they would have to actually request additional funds through the same call for projects. And we received requests for 4 projects. Then I inflated them, and that was another 5. So 5.6. So if the policy committee approves funding the additional fund requests, so to make projects whole, that only leaves us $3.7 million for the 4 years of the TIP. Okay, I can't see.
Karen, this is Sadie. Could you just say that part about funding requests for projects in illustrative years one more time for me so that I grok it?
Okay, so let's go back to this one. So remember in 25 and 26, we did program heavily the project phases. So if we had a project that started, say in 22, had their design in 22, their right of way in 24, and then construction was maybe in 26. So those are the additional, those projects have to be added to the TIP, right? Because they're really not, we just have to make sure we count those. Does that explain it?
I think that was quite a question.
Yeah, you said something that was helpful. Really, I learn every time you present to this group. So thank you so much. I think it's this line, the 11.34 million you were explaining remaining projects. I don't know.
Okay, so the 11.34 million are projects that are already programmed, but they were in the illustrative years. So I'm just adding that we have to take account what those projects are.
Okay.
Because they're already programmed. So of the 33 million, we've already promised 11.34 million of that to project. I guess that's really what it's coming down to.
And the list for folks who are following along is page 4 of the memo in our packet, the kind of salmon color. And it's got the list of the actual projects.
Yes, I could pull those up, but I figured I would just give you the summary at this point. But if you wanted to see what those actual projects were and how they add up to that amount, they are in your memo.
Right.
Okay, so that leaves us $3.7 million. But now we know that the cost of projects is, skyrocketing. And we're not the only ones experiencing this. This out of control costs. It's a nationwide phenomenon. It's worldwide, actually. We're having this problem. Increases are wiping out any additional funds that we thought we were going to get from the new legislation. And it was just some examples of what's happening. A couple of things are causing this. So the reduced limitation rate, again, we talk about the amount of money that we're supposed to get and then the amount of money we actually get, and the difference is really the limitation rate. We have traditionally used like a 94% when we talk about limitation rates, that we get 94% of what we are appropriated, yes. And usually the first year of a bill, we get the most, and then each year after that, it reduces. So the first year this time was like 91%. Uh-oh. We discover, we always get this like in April or May of the year that we're talking about. And so I went back and reduced the amount of funding that I anticipated we would get, and reduced it down to maybe 85%, so we don't run into a problem where all of a sudden we don't have the money we thought. So the available funding that we're getting is actually less. And then, of course, the increased costs. We have the supply chain issues, the increased fuel costs, labor shortages, which then increase the labor costs. There's fewer companies out there that are bidding on projects, so you don't have the competition. All of these things are causing costs to increase at a much higher rate than we had ever experienced before. So, you know, we've experienced project bids are coming in significantly higher than anticipated. 40%. We had one project, it just was bid in May, came in 40% higher than the engineer's estimate. Hayesville Drive, that's the project we're talking about, and it needs another $2.6 million to make that project whole. It's more than it was budgeted. And other projects are going to go to bid soon, and they are probably going to experience the same thing. So here we are, we're looking at these 4 projects that are going to be going to bid in the next 6 to 8 months, probably. An extra 13.2 million that are in construction. If we're talking a 40% increase, well, that's another $5 million. And I said I had 3.2. We don't have it, and that's actually in the wrong tip. I need it now, not in 27, 28. So looking to see if anybody's got their hands raised.
Nope, just like, oh my gosh, more likely.
Yeah. Okay, so what are we gonna do about it? I guess. So we're gonna have to prepare for those types of projects, those types of increases. And we had a meeting with the TAC. Well, we had a meeting of the public works people that are affected by a lot of these projects and talked about what was going on. Everyone is experiencing these cost overruns. Everyone is worried about this, and came to the TAC. And actually, we're looking for a little bit of guidance from the policy committee. So I gave you a couple options here. These aren't limited, it could be any of these, but option A is, you know, make projects whole. I know the policy committee has always been saying, let's just make projects whole. Let's complete projects.
Mhm.
And so you could then provide the additional SKATS funds to existing projects to complete them. We may have to postpone some projects to later, put them in the illustrative years so that we're still keeping them in the tip. We're still making aware of them, but they're really not active in the active years. That could free up $5 to $7 million for the 24-27 years. Don't fund any new projects in the update. And if things turn around, reserve those, you know, we can deal with that later. But then reserve those unprogrammed funds for the potential cost estimate increases that are going to happen, that are likely to happen on these projects that are about ready to go to bid in the next, in the current tip. Option
Karen,
B. Yes.
Just one clarifying comment on the not include any new projects in the update. That would be in the obligated side, but that the list that we have been discussing that has been through the TAC would be able to go forward in an illustrative manner. Is that what we're talking about?
We wouldn't even really put those in the illustrative years. I would only put projects, usually I only use the illustrative years to complete a project.
Gotcha.
So if that's why that was why it was very heavy this time, you know, like the $11 million in the illustrative years, is because those were construction phases for big projects.
Gotcha. So
Lyle?
these are finishing up a multi-phase project, and now we're going to get it done.
Yeah.
Done. Gotcha. Lyle has a question.
So I'm all for making a project whole. And I see in the TAC recommendation is taking the $2 million and moving over the Hayesville Drive to finish that. There's certain areas we really need to focus on. And I think this is one of them where it's been there for a long time. And it's need to be addressed. Love to see it completed. One thing that I had a question for, and one of the projects got bumped, it means a lot to me, is the Orchard Heights back to school project and the sidewalks. So I see it got bumped, which I understand totally. It's a sidewalk versus automotive needs, but still at the same time, I don't see it on the new attachment in the back for the SKATS 2429 Transportation Improvement Program.
That's because it's in the current tip.
It's in the current tip, so it'll still stay in the current tip?
It stays there. We're only talking new projects.
Okay, just be postponed a short while longer.
So
Right.
it would stay where it is.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's not one of the ones that we would be proposing
Yeah.
to change.
Commissioner Mordhorst, the one that's in the tip and has funds right now is the improvements to the south side of Orchard Heights in 2 locations, okay? And the safety crossing at Parkway. That's still funded in the tip. It hasn't gone out to bid, so it might need funds down the road, but it's still funded in the tip. The city of Salem proposed funds for the north side of Orchard Heights when they sent in a pre-application, but they didn't submit a full application for that project. They chose other priorities to submit full applications.
Okay.
And
And
the north side is still on our radar, but right now there's no funds for the north side.
I'm good with that.
And it's and for folks following along, page 3 has the projects that are being retained that we're still going forward with in the current tip. So that's that table 2, correct? The existing projects that will be in the update. And Orchard Heights, number 2 on that list.
Orchard Heights is on that.
Along with Verta, which is near and dear to my heart, and several schools and so forth. So
Exactly. Thank you.
So we're not talking about canceling or moving out any of those projects that are already funded
right.
that were not in the illustrative years. There's one project we'll talk about in a little bit later. Because when I say we need to postpone a project, we need to pick one to postpone. So then I guess if say the option B as we were moving on was to fund new projects. So just say, I'm sorry, projects that are already funded, you'll have to come up with the money yourselves or cancel them. Or we could include a few new projects in the update, not many. There's not a lot of money there. And we could program all of our funds and no reserve to cover these cost increases. Or something in between. Option C is something in between.
Question, Karen.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between, would that be a conversation about the jurisdictions looking at overmatch to stretch the dollars farther?
It could be that. It could be like, well, let's cancel one project or postpone one project so that we can bring in one new project. Or we pick one project to fund. And when I get to the next section, I'll show you the order the projects came in. Unfortunately, the expensive ones came in first, but maybe pick a cheap project. We could pick one, but you have to give up something to do that.
Right, but it's the big ones that are huge because they are complex, but they're very needed, and putting them off. Anyway, y'all know where I'm going with that. Keep going.
Okay, so after some discussion, the TAC said, okay. It was sticker shock. It wasn't, it was a very depressing meeting, just kind of like this, a little depressing. So they said, well, let's take the projects whole. So they recommended to put the $2 million, like I said, I had a little buffer of $2 million. Put that to the Hayesville Drive project so that they can award that project. We'll talk a little more about that one later. And then for the update, we would use the additional, fund all the additional fund requests. So make all the projects whole, except the Delaney Road Battle Creek Bridge project. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. So then, delay the right-of-way and construction phases of the Delaney Road Battle Creek Bridge project, the update cluster. So the Delaney Road Battle Creek Bridge replacement project, it's already had its design, its PE funds, design funds obligated. They've just started on that project. Not very much money spent on it yet. The right-of-way phases were due to be obligated in, I think, 23. And then the construction was in the illustrative years. So out in the future, it's one of that, part of that $11 million that was in the 27, 26, 27, or 25, 26 years.
Right.
It is a project that didn't score as well for the additional fund. So that's why that project, if we push it completely out into the updates illustrative years, it frees up a little bit of money. And then again, they recommend no new projects be included in the update at this time. And then hold any of the remaining program funds, unprogrammed funds for the potential cost estimates, the cost overruns on existing projects, and then maintain the project applications and priorities if for some reason the funding situation improves.
That was the one.
So if we say, okay, all of a sudden costs are down, we have a little bit more money, let's not reinvent the wheel, go back to that, maintain that. That was the tax recommendation. And what I'm asking from you, and you don't have to make this decision right now, we may have to circle back around to it when we have the whole discussion under our belts. But what we're looking for is, what is the policy committee's priority? Do you want to make projects whole? Do you want to make keep yourself a buffer to keep the future projects that are going to go to bid, a little money, make them whole if necessary? Or do you want to fund a new project, or do you want to come up with some sort of a balance of in between them?
Thank you, Karen. I think this was a very good analysis. I also want to thank all members of the TAC. I know that my Public Works Director came and talked with me about this. So I'd be up to speed on his input on this. Since Marion County's project is the one that is being looked at, I would like to hear from Marion County, Colin or Janelle, about the Delaney project and what your thoughts are.
Sure. So I'll just kind of give you, again, obviously, I'm not as engaged in this work on a day-to-day basis as Commissioner Beth was, but I'll give you sort of my thoughts, and then I'll let Lonnie speak specifically to that project. It feels like because of the way that this body uses the illustrative years, you sort of carry over projects in between tips, that there's a certain amount of prioritization that people on this body already have baked into the process here. So I think, in my mind, if you're not going to make the current projects whole, then what you're saying is that those projects in some way are not as important as some future project. So I think that would be the way that I would think about it, is you'd want to be intentional about that and say, whatever this project was that we thought was important, it's not important anymore. We should take that money and fund a different project that's more important. In my mind, that's not Marion County's position. Marion County's position is this is a priority for us. We have prioritized our projects based on what's in the current tip. And so we'd like to see those projects funded before we move on to new projects, which would be next on the
Right, and that was a part of my question, but part of it had to do with the aspect of the Delaney project, and I see Mayor Horning's hand is up as well. Because I don't disagree with you, Commissioner.
I think Lonnie wants to add something
I'd like
specific
to
to
add
this.
a little bit more about Hayesville. Do you like more information on Hayesville or
You're asking for.
Definitely on
Delaney.
Hayesville,
Laney?
loving Hayesville,
Loving Hayesville?
loving Hayesville.
Okay.
Just as we're looking at this step, it does include the recommendation from the TAC, which I'm assuming Marion County was a part of, Marion County
Yes.
Public Works.
Yes.
For the
Yes.
Delaney project is going to
Yes.
be doing a pretty major shift. And I
Yes.
just wanted affirmation of that from
Yes.
Marion County about the Delaney project.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Not a problem.
Basically, we've looked at it as kind of like a shell game, if you will. And so we might have a little bit of shift from in a lot of our projects, whether it's Hollywood Drive, Lancaster Center to Monroe. We've got Center Street, State Street, and Delaney. So we imagine that it's possible that they all could shift a little bit, and Delaney is the one right now that is the furthest out, that has the highest cost, that scores the lowest. So we understand that that's what it means. And just as Commissioner Willis said, we would rather prioritize having a full project and have to push that out even further. Unfortunately, of course, in a perfect world, we would get it all, but knowing that we would have to give somewhere, we fully understand that that's where we would have to give.
Okay. Mayor Horning?
Thank you, Chair. Turner does have a vested interest in that Delaney Road intersection there, and I understand that, you know, the higher priorities to the higher volume of traffic and so on and so forth, but the prioritization piece, I flinch a little bit at, just because if you, Commissioner Wills said the same thing as far as how is the priority move forward. If we take this off the table, there's a lot of cool projects here that need money. So we're going to revisit this next year. And how would that stand in the same type of priority scenario? Because I mean, Turner has other issues as far as pretty fast growth right now, but this particular one is coming right off of the freeway and it flows into our town. And so I just, you know, and I understand the priorities here, but what does that look like next year if we make that decision? Because we'll come in to a meeting and say, hey, we have these new projects, we have this pot of money. Where does this ripple effect keep that project? I mean, if we put this into a chart, how would that stay there so it's in front of something new a year from now or something?
Well, I think that's what I was talking to a little bit about, the idea of the projects maintaining their place in the queue, you know, that they're in line. If the line shifts a little bit, but they retain their prioritization, is where I know my brain was going, that we know that we're going to have to, I am very much in favor of make projects whole, get them done, and make sure that we don't take a project off that was in process, because it is needed. It is, and it won't save us anything, but to make sure that the projects that are in the queue remain in the queue as is, and it's up to the jurisdiction. If the city of Kaiser says, you know, project X is one that we no longer need, or we're going to be doing it a different way, we have then the ability to pull that off from the illustrative years. That would be our request. That's why I'm asking Marion County. This is your order of operation, and the support then of the policy committee to make sure that we retain the order. So we don't want projects that are important for safety and operability to drop off.
That makes sense, Mayor Clark. Can Lonnie weigh in here on that?
I'd like to add one more thing that I think Karen touched on, and I just want to repeat. We will continue moving through in the design phase for Delaney Road Bridge. It's not going away. We are not, I apologize if I made it sound like it was of low priority. It's very much not of low priority. We will continue moving ahead and getting it ready for the bid process. It's just, we will not move ahead with construction until we know we can get that funding secured. Correct?
Correct. And that's why I recommended putting it in the illustrative years to make sure it's still there.
Okay.
So we're not removing it. We're not canceling it. We're very much moving ahead. It will just appear to be delayed.
And
Gotcha.
it will actually end up, like the right-of-way phase, we'll have to go through an amendment to cancel it out of the current tip and put it in the illustrative years. It will look like a cancellation, but it will actually be just moving it.
Understood.
Yeah,
It'll be like in year 28 or 29,
yeah,
right?
28 or 29, yeah.
Yeah. When all this gets done, some phase of the design phase will still be in the current tip. They'll still have money to do design. And the next phase is a right of way, if there is a right of way phase.
There is a right-of-way
And
phase.
construction will be 28 or 29. So we'll have a record in the adopted tip of that. Plus, we'll have these lists that we can always go back to and say, where did it end up when we looked at this last? And I don't know if we'll be good back here a year from now, after we adopt our tip in May. We'll see where we are. I don't know what the situation will be next year. So it may be maybe next year, but it may be a couple of years from now before we reopen the tip to do anything. My guess is when we reopen the tip, it'll probably be something like a project that is ready for bid, just like Hayesville determines it needs more money to be ready for bid. It could
Thank
be
you.
It could be Orchard Heights, it could be Union Street, it could be something Connecticut Avenue. So
Okay.
that'll probably be the next time we open up the tip.
So does anybody want to direct staff to go forward with anything other than option A to make projects whole is my question to the group. Sadie,
I think that's a great recommendation, and I agree with a lot of what the TAC said. I'm hoping to get some clarity on the last point, which is maintain the project applications and priorities if the funding situation improves, but are we kind of holding them in perpetuity? Would there be a point at which we would ask an applicant to update a project application, or that we would reevaluate our priorities based on changing circumstances? Do we have that option if we agree to that TAC recommendation?
So my understanding is, well, and you could do anything you want, but my recommendation as staff would be to keep the applications and the priorities until the next tip update, the next call for projects. And at that time, then I would say, okay, which of these do you want to reapply for, and go through the process again at that point. So in another 3 years, we would readdress it. These would be, if it improves between now and 3 years from now. And
Okay,
when the
that's
tip's
helpful.
updated then.
okay. So
And
I'm
Lyle,
not here.
your hand keeps popping up and down. Did you have something?
Who does?
Commissioner Morthorst, Lyle, I just
Yeah.
see your hand go up and down.
Well, I just want to know if we need to make a motion on this. I
Okay.
think when I spoke the first time, I said Delaney Road, and actually my focus is on Hayesville Drive. And I
Okay.
firmly in making, let's get projects done. It's one of the challenges we've had in the past is just finalizing it. And now with these increase in costs, we're feeling it statewide, our county, we're looking at adjustments right now. I know every city entity that we're looking at right now is making cost cuts. If we can get some projects done through this, I think we all come out ahead. So if we need to make a motion, I'd be glad to present one.
Yeah, I know there's a presentation, but I would entertain putting the motion on the table if we have the information, if we're good with that. So go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion, we follow the TAC recommendation in making projects whole, adding the $2 million federal funding to the Hayesville Drive project. So it can be work for construction starting this year, and then just following as presented on the table.
And that would be a resolution 22-11.
Yes.
Trevor,
Yeah, I think I heard a second in the background. If not, I would second the motion for consideration. But
Thank you.
before we vote, I guess my question was these are all, some of these points are linked together. Does staff feel like there's any more data that we should be aware of before we vote on this? Or, I mean, I think I'm convinced between A and B, I would choose A. I don't know if there's any savvy, sophisticated option Cs that haven't been discussed yet.
I'm at this point, I'm just looking for, do you want A or A, B, or C type of approach? Later, when I do the amendment, then we can talk about the actual amendment and approving the resolution.
Actually, that resolution is now on the table.
Okay, so
22
that's
11.
fine. I can actually advance to what that is, so you can see what that resolution is.
Because we all read it.
And can I just interject to Councilor Phillips' question? Is there more data? The item E is, information about those new projects, the public comment on those new projects, public comment on the additional funds, which we're also calling a new project. So it went through that process. Public did chime in about projects, so that's other data to consider. But it sounds like you're leaning toward option A, which is putting the money toward existing projects rather than funding new projects. But that's an additional data point that public did have a chance to review the new projects and submit comments and likes and various things. So
Trevor,
I
you're good?
appreciate that. Thank you.
Maria?
Yeah, I had very similar questions as Trevor, and thank you, Mike, for directing us to item E, where we have kind of like more of that breakdown of information on the new projects. I guess if I could add my 2 cents, I definitely am more in favor of, moving forward with the projects that we have currently. We wouldn't want to go spend extra money in our own household budgets that we don't have when we can't even cover our current expenses, right? My only piece of concern, I was wondering if staff could either direct me to where I could find this information, is just like how the ranking on this works, like what is that information based on? Because I just want, my biggest concern is that we might punt some like sidewalk construction projects or things that would be able to encourage pedestrian safety.
When we get to item E, I can talk to you a little bit about that as well. I do want you to know that pedestrian safety, most of the projects actually have some component of that. And the pedestrian safety projects scored highest. They are the ones that rose to the top. They usually all have multiple benefits. They weren't just sidewalk projects. They generally have what we call a kind of a urban upgrade, where you take a project that has no sidewalks and you may add a turn lane and sidewalks and bike lanes, and there are multiple things, but most of them do have a sidewalk, a pedestrian improvement project.
Karen, can I add a little bit too?
Yeah.
So I know we're talking about the new project requests, but regarding Hayesville, we looked actually at phasing or cutting scope, and we were going to have to cut such a significant portion of the project that it was really concerning. And it was in the form of sidewalk and bike facilities, right? Because that's most of the project. And so know that with the Hayesville, the ask to have the additional funds, it is really to continue fully funding a pedestrian and bicycle safety project, urbanization project.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely in support of the Hayesville project. We
Okay, thank you.
need so much out there. And yeah, it's an awful place right now for kids to walk to school.
Well, and to answer your question, Maria, as you go through these project descriptions, Karen's right. Nearly any one of them that is a street improvement includes bike ped. So they're very holistic, and they're trying to, and historically, SKATS projects have looked at segments or significant corridors, especially for school safety, neighborhood safety, accessibility to parks and other locations such as that. And so the projects, such as the Wheatland project out of Kaiser, will serve 2 schools, a senior center, and also transit and so forth. So these tend to be very comprehensive because I believe all of our master plans call for those kinds of projects. And I think there are also federal requirements, but it is what is in our master plans to connect all modes safely. So totally on the same page. So we do have a motion on the table to adopt resolution 2211. Is there any further comment or discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying no. No objection, motion passes unanimously. Get her done. I'm looking in the interest of time. Maria asked a great question about item E, and I know that Karen has spent a great deal of time making sure we have all the information necessary regarding these. But in order to make sure that we can get to item G before we start losing people at the top of the hour, is there any objection to asking people to please look at item E? And if we have additional questions to come back, was there any burning question that somebody had about any of the projects before we go to item G? Because I don't want to give that one short shrift.
Well, to be honest, by the time we got to this point, I was going to say I had a great deal, but we don't have a great deal. And I just wanted you to see what the priorities were of those projects. I wanted you to see what kind of input we got from the public. And so that actually when you get to item G, you can see this is the type of outreach we get now and the comments that we receive. There was not going to be a presentation because there was really based on what you talked about. And I really expected that you would fund whole project, make projects whole. It was kind of a moot point to go through them. So at any rate, I think if there's any questions on any of the projects or what the process that we use to prioritize those projects, we can answer them. But I am very happy to move on to item G.
I just want to say one thing, and we put it in the agenda cover sheet, that household survey or postcard survey we sent out in March and April, the 20,000 household, and we did it with an eye to specifically oversample lower income households. So 20,000 households had an opportunity to go to our website, look at the projects, and give us their opinions about what they liked, they didn't like. So it's part of our public outreach that we tried for the first time. We hadn't done a mass mailing of. We thought it was worth a try, and we had decent response rate. I mean, I would have loved higher, of course, but at least more people had an opportunity to know about us. And we had a couple, 1,500 people go to the website.
Yeah, in that.
And I guess a lot of people went there and looked, but they decided not to either answer the survey or answer questions about, or put their input about projects. But that's going to be a new part of our public outreach.
Well, and thank you. That's a great segue into item G. We've had a great deal of discussion and we have adopted a public participation plan that is continuing to evolve and trying new and different ways of broadening our inclusion and our diversity in outreach metrics for response. And so the idea or the concept of a citizen advisory committee was raised. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim. No.
Yes, I can start.
Kim and Mike.
I'll start. Kim and Mike.
Talk a little bit about what you presented, and then we can talk about our public participation program.
Great. Good, thank you. As was discussed, we've had at a couple of our previous policy committee meetings, the role for an opportunity to have a citizens advisory committee or CACs come up. And sort of in response to those questions, staff has summarized some background information, questions, and then put that together in a draft memo that we discussed actually with the TAC. We took it to the TAC this month and asked them about their experiences with the CAC and some of their insights and basically what they thought. So today in the attached memo in your packet includes some highlights of our current public outreach, our history with the CACs back basically many years ago, And then also some questions for the PC to consider. And I have just a few slides that basically summarize that I want to go through. So starting up first here is I wanted to just reiterate again what we do with our current outreach techniques, and that's what we're doing for our current update for the MTP and the TIP. And as we were just saying, Mike said, first of all, we launched a SKATS Transportation Hub website. It's a standalone entity it's linked to our COG website, but it's its own. And when we use that as sort of the focal point for bringing public comment for both the MTP survey that we conducted, and we had well over 100 individual participants with that. That was their general specifics. We presented that information to you approximately 2 meetings ago. And then also the online interactive map for the proposed TIP projects, which people could look at, get more information and leave comments. That's kind of our landing page, but there are multiple pages on that, which include more information about how the MTP is updated, how the TIP is updated, even our congestion management process and our performance measures. So it's a fairly inclusive information and it even has what is SKATS, what is an MPO that has information that people can play with. So we've launched that this year. We tied that to our postcard mailing that went out to 20,000 households. We targeted 7,500 of those cards to neighborhoods that were low income or minority neighborhoods. We wanted that sort of outreach. Our survey and our map is in Spanish, is bilingual, Spanish and English. That 2-month period we kind of tracked, and we did get about 1,500 unique visitors that came to the hub, that transportation hub. Not everybody left a comment, that's okay, but we're looking at getting the word out. We use Facebook, we use our COG website, we share with local jurisdictions, social media accounts. We do have a sort of dedicated interested parties email list that's got at least 300 names on it. We use MailChimp to kind of do updates, get them out regularly. These are often people who have been interested in what we've done before, so they're fairly active and engaged. And then we do actually just physical mailings. At the same time, we do press releases. And of course, as this process in the update goes forward, mainly it's the Ray and Karen show that get farmed out to go to neighborhood association meetings or or requests for information, and which we do increasingly as we even get closer to the draft versions of the documents that will be coming out at the beginning part of 2023. And then let's go to the next slide. And then in addition, there we go. Yeah. So we've included this, that's our game plan going forward with our current updates. And in addition, we'll have other public outreach techniques that we are doing for other specific SKATS work. So our regional transportation safety plan is upcoming. It's going to be including focus groups led by a facilitator that will be specific to the community, looking for people who will be involved in those. And they are both youth oriented. Wait, one is
We haven't determined
the specific participants yet, but there'll be focus groups. And then, for example, with recent corridor studies, a recent corridor study with Wheatland Road, that work included a specific project-specific website itself, survey questions that went out, and rounds of public outreach, and also an interactive map in which people could leave comments, leave what they thought was areas of concern in and around the study area. And the upcoming Cordon Road corridor study has got a public involvement plan that also has identified key audiences and stakeholders. They're going to be holding community workshops. They have a website and they're using social media to get that information out as well. So we have increasingly over the years, we've gotten better and better at kind of leveraging our sort of online presence, getting the information out, particularly virtual open houses, information that's available, getting it spread out through and shared channels with either our other jurisdictions or, as we said, even our mostly predominantly our Facebook page. Thank you. So we had a meeting with the TAC and kind of presented some of the information that we're looking at, what the parameters might be for having a CAC. And basically our TAC members shared their experiences that they have had with the use in their own work. And just in sort of briefly summarizing, Public Works uses traffic CAC that they kind of expressed has been harder to bring really meaningful work to that committee on a regular basis. So their meetings have a tendency to be less frequent, just so that their time is used most efficiently. Transit CAC, Vicki explained, was specifically to sort of focus on service issues and the writer's perspective in terms of feedback that would come to transit, rather than tackling policy decisions or projects per se. He gave the example that they had sample chairs that they were trying to decide which one to choose to add to new bus orders. They brought them to their group, who are basically representing the writer community, and said, what do you think for that sort of perspective? At Polk County, they use, Austin says he uses basically a CAC for very specific projects. They've got a specific project going forward, and that he will sort of query them, use them on an ad hoc, as needed basis. And he said that often when he confers with them to really sort of represent the best way to get the information out, he'll ask them, for example, is it better that we run public notices in a local circular, or should we go to the Statesman Journal? So he queries them that way. And then the Community Development Department for Salem, really shared their experience recently with the Our Salem project. As you know, that's been a long ongoing, they've worked on this. It's been a 3-year project for updating the comprehensive plan, and it's been in multiple phases with consultants that they've brought on board. And they worked in phase 1 to bring together a CAC, and they did specific targeted outreach to try to get some community members, representative community members, to be able to come. And they found that they had people who may have been able to come but could only come for one meeting. They couldn't come with regular attendance. Expressed interest, but they had a hard time maintaining it in sort of meeting in their entity as a single entity. So they disbanded at the end of phase 1. As they've gone into phase 2 and 3 of the process, they actually simply focused their effort and had staff redirect doing outreach and attending community groups and meetings in the community, rather than asking them to sort of come to their specific forum. So I would say, in summary, the TAC strongly suggested that if we go forward with using a CAC, that we reform sort of them to address a specific need that would really help target a gap, or best engage what you as the policy committee would like to see. What would you like to have them specifically do to give them a focused mission or charge sort of going forward, especially to engage their feedback in a meaningful way into what the decisions that you'll be making. So my last slide, just briefly, is just generally, staff outlined many of the questions for you to consider in the memo, but basically sort of in short, kind of boils down to, would want the task of finding people who would serve on the CAC with a balanced perspective. And there would be a commitment of staff time to engage and run that CAC. And I think the really pivotal point in this instance is, do we have enough time to meaningfully utilize a CAC for this MTP and TIP update? Because you are currently already, we're bringing draft chapters to you, Ray's bringing draft chapters for the MTIP, and of course you're making decisions as today about funding and the TIP update. They're kind of right at a crisis point right now. You're making those decisions going forward for the rest of this year. Roughly speaking, draft documents are going to be presented and available in February and March. We will go out for our full court public involvement and public outreach at that time for official public comment, with the target or the timeline that we will be adopting both documents in May of 2022. So really the question is, is the policy committee, would you like to vote to enact a CAC at this time? Consider using one going forward in additional updates. And what do you think? So I'm happy to answer questions that you may have. We brought up several things to think about in general, but happy to hear kind of what you're thinking at this point. What would best serve the policy committee?
Thank you so much. This has been a really thoughtful look at this as one of a variety of mechanisms for the public participation and looking at the holistic of the PPP, which was still pretty new and still getting tremendous results. I really appreciate the looking at this from an inclusion point of view and targeted. I did put in the chat before I go to you, Sadie, that on scheduling regularly scheduled meetings, that's a barrier for a lot of people for participation. It's really effective if you go where people already are. We've had the same problems with Kaiser's traffic safety bike ped, making sure that we're using their time effectively, and we don't always have meaningful work for them. It's kind of in project spurts, but we have to have a traffic safety committee under state statute. So that's why we still have one. Otherwise, I think we would go do a project based, just based on our experience. Sadie.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, Chair Clark, Kathy Clark.
I'm coming late to dinner.
I just want to say thank you to Kim for, I mean, really excellent work on the public outreach. And a couple questions about what we are doing, and then a couple questions that came up in the last slide that you shared. And then maybe I have some ideas. Do we have, or did we capture statistics on who responded to the postcard mailing? Where, I mean, demographically, do we understand who responded to the call?
We collected by zip code. So I collected by zip code because we twofold. So in the survey that included questions that we were looking at the long range plan, so the MTP, and we asked about, basically that was a prioritization, priorities. What do you want to spend on? What's important to you? How would you rate these? Which do you think? How would you buy? Do you bike? Would you bike? And then a very open-ended question. And we had 100+ open-ended questions that were sort of categorized by what people thought was important. And that was, we did, sorry, two meetings ago.
Yeah, I had to leave
meetings ago.
before.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I had to leave before the end of that. I was sorry to miss that.
Three meetings ago, sort of as an overview and outreach. And in that, we collected, so we were going for a quick survey. So we only asked a zip code demographic, so that we knew geographically where they represented, and we got very good representation, sort of SKATS area wide, and we did get people who answered from zip codes that were essentially, we were targeting East Salem, Northeast Salem area neighborhoods. So we did get people answered. The survey was in Spanish bilingual, and which was translated and incorporated into the multiple choice. In the free form answer, we received one answer that was written in Spanish. So but the questions that were multiple choice were presented in Spanish, but were tabulated into a final answer that would be summarized in English. So
okay,
from that standpoint, we didn't collect age or race. We didn't go through
age, race, income, identifying with a disability, have a car.
Right.
Those are all, those I think would be important to me to know. And then on the slide that you showed with, I think it was considerations, could you help me understand what it means to have a citizen advisory committee with membership that has a balanced perspective?
Feedback from the TAC simply stated that they very often have people who will be happy to serve, but they are coming with a specific agenda in mind, in that they have something they would like to lobby for. And the suggestion was simply, how about people, it would be nice to be able to have people who are willing to listen to all sides, right? And it was not necessarily a cautionary tale, just simply, why is somebody interested to serve? And that very often people who were ready and interested and willing to serve certainly wanted to talk about one or two of their top priorities, and that they would make that their priority in terms of giving feedback. So the
No,
suggestion.
I understand. That's how you get the usual suspects in the room.
Getting the usual.
Give them another opportunity to attend a meeting that they have the time and bandwidth to attend. So just a couple thoughts. So I facilitate a statewide citizen advisory committee for the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And what we focused on doing was creating an advisory committee that mimicked the demographics that are represented in our state. And so we try to achieve a balance by asking demographic questions in our application process. That then we assemble a group of people, you know, with lots of different lived experience, but who represent different income demographics, identify with a disability or don't, identify as Latinx, Asian, you know, Black, Asian Pacific Islander. And so we tried to get as many of those characteristics represented on our advisory committee, which is, I think it'll be 10 when we have a new congressional district. Right now it's 9, and we're pretty close to our mark. The hardest group to fill was youth. We don't have the opportunity to compensate, but if we did, I would recommend that. We have had some pretty good success in other advisory capacities at our kind of state level, and bringing people to meetings when we're able to compensate. And the way that we have done that is by running mini contracts through community-based organizations. So having the funds run through an existing organization that can facilitate. There is a lot of extra staff time on our part that goes into supporting members from those different community-based organizations, particularly those that don't speak English as a first language, and helping them prepare for meetings in order to make meaningful contributions to the process. That said, I just attended, hi again, Councilor Phillips, the City of Salem's City Council meeting last night on behalf of that group, while the chair of our Citizen Advisory Committee presented an award to the City of Salem for their exemplary community engagement process in phase 2 and beyond of the Our Salem project. And so I think there's a real opportunity to model and maybe capitalize on some of the deep community work that they have done in the Our Salem process in building relationships with these different community-based and community-serving organizations, and tapping into those relationships as a way of potentially building a citizen advisory committee. And to the question of, do we have enough time? I'm just going to express my frustration at that, because I think the first time I brought this up was 4 or 5, maybe 6 months ago, the first time it came up. And we are only now having it as an agenda item before this group. And so if we are out of time for that reason, it is very frustrating to me that this is the first time we are discussing it as an agenda item. And that's what it took. So those are my thoughts. I'm happy to share more ideas. If you want to move forward with this, especially, I'm more than happy to be a resource.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. I would also, when you talk about building relationships and a public participation plan, looking for more and more of those opportunities rather than asking people to gather to us to go where people are and engage more deeply across the community. So I know a big organization like the LCD making statewide land use decisions. When we're looking at projects, I think we have an opportunity to do more and deeper outreach, but that would be just my point of view. I appreciate you. Oh, Maria, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand up. My bad.
Oh, no worries. Thank you, Kathy. I again also wanted to say thank you to staff for all the work that you've been doing on the outreach. And I definitely hear a lot of the concerns, and especially like the comments that the TAC had about how, you know, people just come in with like their specific agendas, and we definitely gather the same key players. And I guess that's why maybe we should take a step back and not call it a citizens advisory committee, because I think what both to Sadie's point and to Mayor Clark's point, it's that when we want to build relationships and reach out to the community members that are most impacted. And I think coming from like my own day job specifically, that does require a lot of going to where people are at and already gathering in certain ways and in certain spaces. Like for example, in my day job, one of our affiliate organizations is Farm Worker Housing Development Corporation. And so just kind of spitballing is that they have staff that's dedicated to doing check-ins with their tenants and doing outreach and having tenant meetings and gathering. So maybe an organization like that would be something where we could partner, because there's kind of like a specific demographic that's already identified there. It's low-income housing, and the majority of it being like the Latinx population. And we could just like do kind of like double duty, kill two birds with one stone, if you will. There's your captive audience. And of course, like when it comes to doing this kind of outreach, you know, sometimes I don't know if we have the capacity now, or, you know, who would be taking on this work, but also being amenable to the idea of also compensating these organizations for their time in helping us do this kind of outreach. But I think that just depends on the kind of outreach that you want to do. And so I do appreciate very much like the postcards and like all the social media outreach and the websites, and really grateful that it's like both in Spanish and English. My only concern is that when it comes specifically to like the Latinx community, there is a huge technological divide. Most folks, and I mean, I know that we saw this play out definitely in COVID, is that most folks don't have smartphones to scan a QR code or punch in like a link right away, or they might not even have like Wi-Fi accessible or computers at their homes. And so they have to take that additional step to be able to provide that survey. Like one of the things that, again, in my day job is we do a lot of radio ads and outreach that way, providing some sort of way for the community to contact us if they need more information, because like that technological divide is real and it's pretty big. So yeah, I guess that's just my points, is the outreach to the community in the groups that they're gathering. And I think it would also help with the timeline of it. Like I know it's summer, there's plenty of people and events. This definitely would also depend on staff's capacity to be able to attend those events, to be able to do that outreach. But I think it could also help a little bit with the timing piece of it, of being able to connect those resources. And I think really just focusing on oversampling the demographics that have not been represented, and just being like super kind of honed in for a little bit on the ones that are not typically providing us input or responses. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. And Kim's furiously taking notes and double checking back too. Lyle.
So I guess I've been doing this for quite a while, and I know that we have a lot of community outreach when these projects are actually created before they even get to us. There's a lot of community outreach, community involvement. I've served on many of these teams when these projects are being created. And I look at the diversity we have on this team we have right here, and we just try to implement what's already gone through the communities and their citizens advisory committees and stuff. I don't see the need for another level of that. I just see expenses. And right now today, with the expenses being as high as I want to see as much money going to these projects so we can improve safety in our streets as much as we can. In the future, if things in the economy changes and evolves, then maybe project specific, I think would be excellent. but it's just another thing that slows things down even more and just takes more funding from the projects we need to get to the people and our roads and sidewalks and bicycle lanes.
Thank you. Is there anybody, I'm going to see if there's anybody else first. Okay, Sadie.
Thank you.
Two more came up.
Yeah, this is quick. I do think that if I am evaluating the opportunities for broad engagement in the TIP versus the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the longer reach plan, the MTP, seems to hold higher value. I mean, it does hold higher value to me because that creates the plan by which we sort of like administrate the TIP, right? And so to me, that would seem the more logical place to broadly engage the community. I can see Lyle's point to kind of like, okay, well, these projects have already, you know, gone through a certain level of public outreach and evaluation. The MTP has not.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Trevor, then Steve, and then we're going to need to wrap up.
Thank you. Chair Clark, let me lower my hand if I can. Okay. So, I mean, I get the sense that we're cost constrained right now. So that even though there are many, you know, admirable advantages to having something like a community advisory committee, I don't know that even as an MPO right now that we're adequately resourced to achieve that. I mean, it seems like if I read the recommendation from staff is that if you read this from a neutral point of view, staff seems to be, whether they know it or not, they're making the argument that we don't have those resources right now. And I just want to clarify, like, do we have an estimate on actual, you know, cost and time? Like, what would it take? And could staff do, you know, create a citizen advisory committee out of whole cloth? I mean, I think that there would be advantages if we lived in a perfect world and we could have it. I think it's an admirable thing to have, but I mean, you know, we're in the city of Salem, we're short 300, you know, FTEs across general fund obligated positions and across all the departments. So I don't want to create something that is an unfunded mandate if the staff can't do it. So I'd like to hear more from staff. You know, am I summarizing this wrong? Am I missing something? What's the brass tacks on this?
I'll speak first if my staff want to chime in a second. You know, when I think about this, first of all, we try to provide you all kind of angles to this question, right? The information from experiences, our partners, and what we do, other public outreach to kind of really chew on this issue. If you directed us to have a CAC, I think you have to ask yourself the question of what do you really want them to do for you? What's their utility? Do you have specific questions? I mean, what's your top 4 questions you'd want them to provide some feedback on the direction of the plan specifically? Are the policies, you know, worded correctly? Is the direction of the projects in the right order? Does the overall transportation plan make sense to them? So I think you have to ask yourselves, what do you really want a committee to discuss and give you feedback? To me, that's number one, if you decided to direct us to have one. Number 2 is a little related, you know, is the focus just on the plan, or do you want this committee to do other things? So when we had a citizen advisory committee back in the 90s, we had regular meetings of them monthly or every other month, and we'd bring many things to them, and it just wasn't really appropriate. They didn't have a lot of input. They didn't really think there was much for them to do. So we'd have to think of the focus of them. Is it just the long range plan? Is that their most important function? And then we bring a committee every 4 years. We stand one up. We kind of describe what's the plan is like. We get input, and then we provide it to you. So that could be the focus of the committee instead of having an ongoing one that meets every month. And then lastly, the timing. So we did, you know, want to make sure you had all aspects of knowing the pros and cons of having a committee. That's why we took the time to write this memo and go to our TAC for information. And as Kim was saying, right now we have maybe 6 months before we have a draft of the long-range plan. So in that 6 months, can we both find the right people? You know what I mean? Can we find representative people? Can we bring them up to speed? And do we have the questions from you of what you want them to respond to? Of course, they'll bring their own ideas as well. So in those 6 months, can you see something that would be useful to them, useful to you in those 6 months? Or do you want us to start again with the next cycle and say, we're going to start afresh? We update this plan every 4 years. We want to start afresh with the next update and say, we're going to do it carefully, and this is how we want this group to be formed. Maybe there's an application process so that we're getting people that aren't focused on just one issue, but we, just like you might be applying for a planning commission, there's an interview process to be on this commission or committee. So those are the three things that I think about: the utility of this committee, what's their focus, and the timing. Is we do it now, do we do it later, or do we not do it at all, and we just continue with our other public outreach activities? And the final word is, even if we don't have a citizen advisory committee formed now, we're still going to be doing a lot of outreach for our plan. We're still going to go and have the websites, and we're still going to have outreach to neighborhood associations, and we'll still do other kind of public outreach. So it's not like we're stopping that. It's more of a question of what could a citizen group do in the next 6 months.
I mean, my follow-up, just my comments, since I asked the question, I'm sorry, if I may, Chair Clark, is that, my next question is, what's the more important thing? I mean, I think there are advantages to both, but what I'm hearing in the short term is the questions may be just as important as the citizen action or advisory committee. So if we know like what our goals are and the questions we're trying to get answered from the public, that's just as important as, having an advisory committee potentially. That's what my aha moment in hearing what you just said. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Steve and then final word from Maria.
Thank you, Chair. I'm kind of pigtailing on Trevor's comments too, as far as I lean toward the staff recommendation just because, you're creating another layer through our process as far as reaching out to the communities. And right now, I feel like what they're doing, we're reaching out and touching a lot of different groups. And to Lyle's point too, when we were talking about a particular project, we're reaching out on those particular items. And in my experience too, is been in banking for 45 years, so I get on a lot of committees and volunteer on different things like that. And if you ask for the input from too many people, it muddies the water. And then we have to put them on a vertical learning curve, and they're coming back to us to say, what more can we learn? Or we have our meetings, we talk about a particular project or process, and they lose members or something like that. And so we're working on a continuous basis just to keep the group alive. And if we believe that we're getting it out to enough of the right people, I wouldn't want to add an extra layer to the staff's time. Cost is one thing, but just the layer of managing people that way, that feels onerous to me.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Maria, and then we're at 1:30. We're going to have to wrap up.
Very quickly, I think from my perspective is that I am totally fine with not moving forward with the CAC as long as there is more like that intentional planning on community outreach to the specific historically excluded communities that we're not hearing from. Because I live in the Northeast and I don't know of any of my neighbors that received the postcard. So how can we make sure that we're really targeting the communities that we need to hear from? And I know that it can be slow, it can be onerous, but especially when it comes down to people's feeling secure and comfortable in how they're traveling in our jurisdictions. I don't really feel like there's a price tag or a timetable that we can apply on that when we're talking about how our community is getting about safely, securely, and in a way that doesn't negatively impact their health.
Thank you very much. I think that's I love that, the intentional outreach. And Kim is always asking us, who do we need to talk to? Where do I need to go? How do we get more information out? So I would, on Kim's behalf, ask every time you have an idea, an opportunity, please get that to her, because she is always adding to the public outreach, public participation plan to make it as robust and as nimble and as effective as possible. So we are all ambassadors in that work. And I encourage us to be very engaged in that.
And I will say that we have gleaned quite a bit of information from our Salem process. I mean, I work with Eunice Kim, worked with her for years. So, and they've done, I basically took all of their contacts that they've done and added them to our contact information, whether they wanted it or not. All right, you might say it was spam, but rather that they unsubscribe than not get subscribed in the first place. So we have, I mean, as I said, we're always looking kind of, and that I work with her. I will be happy to continue that dialogue and follow up with her work that she's done into the community and the success. So who we do further outreach.
And now that people are back in person in more and more spaces, I think that us letting Kim know where there are opportunities, people are gathering, people are together, would like to hear. National Night Out, by the way, is coming up, and that's, you know, area wide with all sorts of neighborhood parties. So just encourage, you know, where people are gathered, let's be there, but be intentional about it and make sure that we are, when we see a gap, let's reach out and find out where we can fill that. Thank you very much for everybody for a very robust and productive conversation. At this time, the tip modification that was provided by Kim or Karen was in your packet. Any questions or comments on that? Other business, the next OMPOC meeting is July 29th. It's going to be a hybrid in-person at LCOG in Eugene. Like to know who would like to attend.
And Chair, we skipped over pop employment, right?
I did. Oh,
It's the kind of item that is more informational, but we at least wanted to recognize that was in the
I
past.
flipped my page.
And if there was any question, we'd be happy to answer. It's more informational right now. Just the data for our long range plan.
My bad. I am so sorry, Kim. That was a
No problem.
great
It was informational anyway. So.
Well, I'm watching it because that is something that we have to keep on watching between, especially Kaiser and Salem, as we're looking at our urban growth boundaries and so forth. The one question I did have, now that you mention it, where'd it go?
There is a formatting problem in the memo, a double table. If that answers your question.
No. Apparently I put it down somewhere. Oh, population. It had to do with the comparison of population and jobs. There was total population, which includes people who are workforce, you know, the work age and everybody. So is there another column that we could get for the population that is in that 16 to 66 age frame? And I said 66 on purpose because people can't retire fully until they're 66.
Our employment numbers, we get numbers that come from the employment department, and they don't break out by age.
Okay.
We're not able to break out by, we get total employment. So we have, you're an employee, sort of yes or no. So
Well, I'm looking at the percentage of our population because Kaiser's almost 40,000, but what percentage is actually work age? Because if I say, well, only 7,000, that's
I
40,000.
can get you statistics like that. Yeah.
What?
I can get you statistics like that. I can get you better information.
Thank you, because those are commuters. Possibly, or not commuters. So that would be helpful in understanding our commute shed, if you will. And I found my note. Thank you. Again, my apologies. Anyone else on the population forecast? Other business, the OMPOC meeting 29th.
Right, so I need at least one person. We usually have two, but one is fine. It's up to whoever wants to attend.
Unfortunately,
And
I'm going to be out of town on that day, Ms. Lyle.
I can.
Okay,
Need one more.
Unfortunately, I'm at work.
well,
I'm taking
Chair
the day off.
Clark, I think most people are just sending about one these days that I've noticed. Some places send more, but usually it's about one.
It's going to be easier for me after August 31st.
Thank you, Chair Clark, for going.
But I'm going to go ahead and take the day off to do it. I'm just going to blow what little, and I only have a few like minutes here or there of quote unquote vacation, but I'm retiring from my state job on August 31st.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Chair, maybe we could drive down. If you want to attend in person, maybe we can drive down together.
Oh, that would be an absolute kick. We haven't done that in a long time
I know.
on the calendar. Let's do that. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so much fun. Okay, OTC meeting on the 14th of July. Our policy meeting will be on July 26th, and the next HAC meeting is on July 12th. All right, anything else really good of the order?
Just thank you for your attendance today, for example, full attendance, and your attention to these items. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, everybody.
On behalf of Marion County, can I just thank the policy committee for the decision made today? Thank you.
All right, let's get her done. With that, we are adjourned.
Yeah.
Exactly.